a lie that I'm trying to dispel in my own mind is that in not having the nuclear format family that I was told I needed to secure stability at an old age, I'd like to believe that in building community the way that I am today is going to somehow set me up for a nice, still community-driven future, even in my old age, even though I don't have a lot of examples of what that looks like.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from all over the world to hear their personal journeys of self-discovery through the lenses of love, sex, and relationships.
Our mission is to show people that they're not alone and to inspire them to embrace their true selves so that together we can open minds and live authentically without shame.
We believe everyone's story is powerful and beautiful, yet it's important to remember that everyone does life a little bit differently and that the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we aren't doctors. Please consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Welcome to episode 350. I have to just take a minute and say, woohoo, we made it to episode 350.
Woohoo! It's a landmark, milestone.
That was not a very excited woohoo.
Well, I was trying not to wake our neighbors up.
It does feel like a milestone. Anyway, we're Finn and Emma. Today we have an incredible interview, yet again, with Andy.
We just keep knocking it out of the park. I don't want to brag.
I know.
350 times in a row.
350 times in a row. But we have our lovely guest to also thank for that.
Yes.
So
today's no exception.
Exactly. Today we talk with Flora and Andy. They have been together about 7 years. Open for about 4 of them. They are married and polyamorous. And today we walk through their journey. It's so full of love, laughter, and a lot of hard work too.
Yeah, lots of hard work. I mean, they kind of got their initial start in talking about non-monogamy as the result of an infidelity.
Yeah.
Actually, multiple infidelities on both sides in various ways. And they talk through how that happened, how they healed from that, how it brought them together and really set them on the journey to where they are today. They also talk about the incredible journey that they both went on navigating and finding ways to be non-monogamous and explore keeping themselves safe as a trans, non-binary queer couple, which is a huge part of both of their individual stories and as their story together, where they started off, they'll talk about this. They started off looking for threesomes and ultimately determined that exploring on their own and still being able to have some, connection together with that is really what fits. So yeah, they take us on an amazing journey today and just a ton of gratitude to both of them for coming on, for sharing their story, and for doing the work that they do.
Yes.
Quick shout out. Yeah. So they'll talk about their work towards the end and they'll mention some links, actually a link. That link is in the podcast show notes to their Instagram account. I also want to mention that they talk about a couple of sort of time-sensitive activities or events. One was a workshop that was like the day after we recorded. So this was recorded a few months ago, or actually a few weeks ago. So that's already passed. The other one is Andy was in a play, the lead in a play, which is amazing. And we're super bummed that we couldn't get this out faster, but that play ran, I think, through June. And so...
But don't worry, they said there will be more.
This is not the last play that Andy will be in. So, yes, keep your ears open. Check out their Instagram. Follow their Instagram for all of their work and all of the things they're doing. And yeah, we just check that out. And again, thank you, Flora and Andy.
Yes, the bottom line, you're going to want to listen to this episode. So for anyone who is a premium subscriber, we're going to jump into the interview right now. And for anyone else, we do have a couple of announcements. First up, if you're not familiar with the premium subscription, it's a way to skip these announcements up front, but jump right into the interview. But don't worry, you still get important dates in the outro. To sign up, go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, scroll down on the homepage, and you can sign up right there.
And those important dates that Emma was vaguely, elusively speaking about, we've actually crossed off a lot of our events that are on the calendar at the moment, but there's a big one coming up in September, right in the middle of September 13th to the 15th. We are hosting a community retreat out here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we would love for you to check it out. We talk about our virtual community all the time on the show because it's amazing and we love everybody who is a part of it. All 300 plus of you. we've crested the 300 mark, Emma.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
So people...
It is exciting.
Yeah. So if you're not familiar, people come to our virtual community looking for support, friendship, all the amazing things, and they find that there. And we've started doing in-person retreats to help strengthen the virtual bonds that everyone has. So we're doing those a few times a year. And the next one is out here in September. It's a great time to join the virtual community because you still have just about 2 months to get into the community, get to make some friends, and then join everybody out here in the Bay Area. So for more information,
go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Go to the community tab, scroll down, find out all of the information right there. You can join the virtual community for only $5 a month. We would love to have you join us.
Yeah, you also, in addition to the community retreat, you get access to a men's group, a women's group. We do monthly calls for both of those. We also do monthly community calls and so many other amazing things to help people find their people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Come join us. And next up, our favorite way to get tested for STIs, it is stdcheck.com. Using the links on our website on the resources tab saves you $10, making a 10-panel test only $129, and you get to know your sexual health status and support the show. So thank you for using those links and going and getting tested.
Yeah, I would just, we haven't talked about this in quite a while, but Emma and I use this service. We absolutely love this service, and we've been talking about it for years, and we've gotten so much great feedback from people who have used the service as well.
I know. I was just thinking, I was listening to one of our early episodes recently, and we were talking about STD Check back then. That was 6 years ago.
That was 6 years ago. So what that tells you is it's an amazing service and people use it all the time. So thank you to everyone who uses it. Truly, you using those links helps support the show financially in a way that allows us to keep doing this. And we are super, super grateful to all of you for that. So yeah, those links are on the resources tab or in your podcast player show notes below.
And a reminder to reach out to us. Go to the Contact Us page. Send us a voicemail. Send us an email. We would love to hear from you. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, we would love to have you on, and just reach out to us. We'll get it scheduled. And if you have any questions or comments, we'd also love to hear from you as well.
As long as they're positive.
Positive only?
Only the positive stuff. I don't have room in my life for negativity, Emma. All right.
Unfortunately, that's not how life works.
That's not. You can send us all your feedback. We love all of it. All right.
And now let's go and talk with Flora and Andy.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Flora and Andy, Andy and Flora. We are super excited to have you here today. And we told you this, but we'll tell the listeners as well. This is our first interview back after about 6 weeks. So we would love it if you two would take it easy on us today. We're dusting off the cobwebs. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Hi,
Oh, go for it. I was going to say, we would love for you to start by introducing yourself. So jump right
in. My name is Flora. I live in LA here. I've been in LA for the last 7 years. I am a creative type rascal. Yeah, that's me. And I'm here with my partner, Andy.
Hello, I'm Andy. I'm they, them pronouns, Mexican-American, actor, filmmaker type.
Also a rascal or not as rascally?
Also a rascal, yeah. It depends, what is it, Tuesday? Yeah.
Just depends on the day. It's actually Wednesday. You missed a day.
It's Wednesday. So
you lost a whole day.
No rascal today.
Today I'm a saint.
Perfect. Well, we'll see if we can pull a little rascal out. So
yeah.
Yeah, let's maybe dig into the relationship stuff. So what does the relationship between the two of you look like? And then maybe we can figure out how we got here.
Absolutely. Today we are married and we are polyamorous. We're both polyamorous and not mainly guided by like non-hierarchy. We have our own version of that going on. I would say those are like that's the quick wrap up on the intricacies of the relationship.
Yeah, we're pretty nested, but we also look up to the non-hierarchical dynamics, and so we do try to relay that to our partners. Like, hey, it is like a first come first serve situation. Don't think that just because we live together and we're married, you come second or are less important. That's just what we aspired to. But also, the socio-financial situation just sort of brings you into a nest very often. So
yeah. I mean, I would love to dig into that as we get into it, because I think that's one of the places that we've started to see people be a little more. There's a lot more nuance there, right? We hear, look, we're non-hierarchical or we're hierarchical, and those are like really dividing terms these days in the polyamory world. And I would love to talk about that, because it sounds like a lot of your day-to-day practical structure would sort of lean towards hierarchy, but that it sounds like you move through that trying to be as non-hierarchical as possible. And so I'm excited to talk about that more, because that's a fun needle to thread, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's something to acknowledging the realities of relationships and the fact that there are, even if you're practicing non-hierarchy, there are definitely ways in which it can play out in and it seems a lot like hierarchy, or the reality is that like there are some hierarchies built into things like living together. That's definitely like, I get way more access to Andy than any of their other partners because we're together all the time. So like Andy mentioned, we do a first come, first serve sort of thing. So whether it is a crisis or a celebration, if I need Andy and they're already busy with another partner or they already have plans, our agreement is that I'm not going to come to them and ask them to drop something else that is already in the works or was already planned, what have you. Because that's just not, well, I love it because it works out for my own sensibilities, this dynamic between us, because I don't want my partner to be my only source of input, whether that is, emotional, whether that's physical. I'm recovering from a surgery right now, and that, I'm, as much as I am so thankful to Andy for that, I also am glad that I have built myself a strong and broad support system, that there wasn't just one person I'm looking to for physical help in this instance. So I like it because it allows Andy to act in the way that I would want to act for them, if that makes sense. We get to treat each other in a way that lines up with how we want, sort of golden rule type situation. If Andy's already working on something, good or bad, with someone else, I say, keep doing that. And when you have space for me, I love space.
Yeah.
Or presence, rather, in this case.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea that, right, that it's not, you go to each other and say, hey, I'd love to go to a movie on Friday. And they're like, well, I had plans with somebody else, but let me cancel those and we'll go to our movie, versus, oh, well, I'm busy on Friday, but I'm free on Tuesday. Let's do something on Tuesday. Let's put that in. And then, too, that when you have Tuesday booked, that one or the other isn't going to come by and say, oh, hey, I need to cancel Tuesday because somebody else wants my time Tuesday, right? Like, you're kind of holding sacred the plans that you've made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank God for Google Calendar.
Right?
Yep. Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's maybe take a step back in time a little bit. When did different relationship styles, alternative relationship styles, or polyamory come into the worldview for the two of you? And, did it happen at the same time, or did you sort of have some experiences before you met each other?
Okay, well, we met on Grindr in 2017.
Lovely place to meet people.
Yeah.
lovely place. I'm sure you've heard wonderful things, fabulous things.
We moved in pretty soon after, and then you came out publicly as trans. You want to take it? Do you want to know? And then, sort of around the same time, I don't know. I think that we started too fast and too deep. And then I took a couple trips to see family, I think, or I was at work, and then infidelities started rising. And so then we sort of dealt with that pretty early.
So there was a lot going on in those first little bit. It sounds like there's a lot of moving pieces.
Then, well, it was just like I was living with a band, and I wasn't feeling very well appreciated. And then I met her, and she just made me feel so awesome. So then when I moved in, and she a few months later, she's like, "Hey, I cheated." I was like, I don't want that to be my story. I'm not the person that gets cheated on. So I'm going to choose to forgive you because I want you. Normally that's a boundary where I would have been like, okay, we're done next. But with her, it was just someone I still wanted. I understood, the way, what she told me and the why and where she was in her life and her, just her journey in general, moving out to LA, and she'll tell you more about it herself. I just sort of understood how not to take it personal, at least for the first time. But then, a year and a half later, I found myself going on the apps and looking around and I never actually met up with anyone, but I saw myself considering it. So we ended up sort of talking about it again. It just kept coming up. You brought it up first. I sort of panicked because I grew up in Mexico with this white picket fence vision of wife, kids, the nuclear family, very Catholic sort of upbringing. And here I was with dating this polyamorous trans woman who was I love you, let's do it. And it was definitely a lot of conversations. We read a book called Waking Up Together. That helped a lot. We actually thought about rewriting it in they/them, using they/them pronouns across the board and sort of more poly terms because it was very cisgendered.
You're hilarious. Your storytelling is so funny to me because this is all over the map. It's over here and then this happened, but that happened before.
The can of worms.
Yeah, you opened for sure.
But please fill in gaps. I mean, yeah.
So I love it. I want you to fill in gaps too, but I love it because it's just testament to how different brains work, right? It's just this is where I'm going and that's okay. And we can fill in some gaps and add more detail as needed.
Yeah.
Yes. That's one of my favorite things about our relationship, and also the most challenging parts. One of the most challenging parts of our relationship is just how different we are. And it's just so crazy that it has worked for so long and works so well for us to be just such totally different people. But then, there's enough of the important stuff that we're well aligned with.
Yeah, I will just say we can relate to a bit of that. When if you were to ask us each to tell a story of something that happened, you wouldn't even know that that we were in the same place. It is that different of a story, and they're like, "Wait, you were at the same place?" Oh no, that was both of us recounting the exact same experience.
Mm-hmm. It's like the difference between the scenic route and the direct route, but they're both just fine.
If that's what you want to call it, we can call it.
I'm with you there, Andy. I'm with you. That's the way my brain works too.
And I'm pretty sure I've said that exact same thing to Emma before, Flora. So sure, we can call it that.
So going back though, I'll say for myself, I had my whole life essentially had an awareness of non-monogamy because I was raised really Christian, and it's interesting to live through other people trying to justify a religious text having so much non-monogamy in it and consensual non-monogamy, the way it's portrayed. It's this is somebody has multiple wives and it's meaningful and they have kids with multiple people and all of that. So that was there. But then I was at the same exact time being told, this is, marriage is one specific way. It is one man and one woman, and that's it. And that's all. And there's no questions. And like anything else is heresy. So that started out sort of landing funny for me at an early age. And by the time I was moving into my teenage years, I was on the internet, love being born in the 90s. I had the internet as a teenager. It was great. I think I really was in a sweet spot of the internet also before it became what it is now.
Before it became the internet. Yeah.
So it was just enough. It was like a good bottleneck, just enough access to new types of people, new relationship styles, new sexualities and gender identities. And that sort of all came together as a package for me of I got onto the internet. I started introspecting more about gender and sexuality. And then being on those parts of the internet were the same parts that had non-monogamy. So 16 was the first time I used the term polyamorous for myself. And then in a very funny move, I said that I think once or twice and then never said it again for 5 years. I had just tried it out and I was like, oh, let's see how that is. But then something kicked in with my deeply ingrained sense of obligation to monogamy. And I just kept pursuing monogamous relationships. So,
well, you're also in high school. I'm curious,
yeah.
If you're throwing that out there in high school, how did your classmates receive that? You're rolling hey, polyamory is here in high school now. How did it go?
It was pretty chill, honestly, and in a hilarious way. I feel really lucky. I had a very positive high school experience, and my queerness, my gender identity could have been things that made it go really poorly for me. And I am very fortunate it wasn't a big thing for me. There was just other stuff going on. Everybody was more focused on other stuff. So I kind of skated by. And the same thing for polyamory. It was a little bit of oh, okay. And then I didn't keep pressing it. So nobody pressed me on it.
Yeah. Amazing.
I also think there might have been a sense, and this is just me guessing, that even among your peers, there might have been a sentiment of, oh, it's just a phase. Eventually, you'll want to settle down.
For sure. I mean, I think, 10 plus years ago, there was a lot more of that with gender and sexuality as well, right. Of a lot more, it's a phase. And I think totally there's a long-standing idea that it's non-monogamy is something you might try on and then you'll settle down. Mm-hmm. Or then you will do X, Y, or Z to do the normal quote unquote thing.
Yeah.
So
so it wasn't a phase though. I mean, spoiler alert, or we're still in the phase.
That is the thing. It wasn't a phase. We met and we started dating monogamously because that was all that either of us knew at that point.
Yeah.
And we both had a rocky go at that. I was coming off of losing the last partner that I had unexpectedly at 22. It didn't make any sense. So I was really trying to heal from that when we met.
Yeah.
And initially I was we need to take this slow, blah, 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 blah. I'm not ready. And then you fast forward 2 months later and I'm so I do think I want to pursue something with you. I don't know how fast 2 months is. I guess it depends on who you ask. And then what I do think is quick for sure is that less than a year and a half later, we committed to each other. We got married.
Yeah.
Which was fast. So I think that is part of we were very wrapped up in the emotions and what early relationship feelings, new relationship energy. And we got married, and I came to a place where I was like, oh, I know that I want to be with you. I don't know exactly, I can't predict what that'll look like for the rest of my life, but I know that I want to put my whole self into trying. And that was a beautiful thing, coming to that point with someone. And then it's interesting how interspersed with all of that was like infidelity coming up before and after that on both of our ends. And it was a beautiful thing to be able to work through that and to be with someone who is like, okay, that's bad. That hurt my feelings. That broke our trust. That did so much. But I want to continue to be in a relationship with you. And that is what we did. And I'm glad that we navigated it when we did, because then when it came back up later, like 3 years into our relationship, I was like, hey, I am having feelings that I've had before about wanting to interact with other people. And I did this before. I interacted with other people, and that was the wrong decision. We're here again. So my only choice is to talk to you about it. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know if we're going to like this or hate this, but we should talk about it, because I'm not going to hurt you in the way that I did. But I also need to tend to myself, tend to my own needs.
Yeah. I'm curious, Flora, backing up, and one of the things you said, Andy, earlier was that when the infidelity happened, you were able to not take it personally, which, by the way, like, that's an amazing thing to be able to do across the board. When somebody's, even just somebody saying, no, I don't want to go on a date with you or whatever, it's so easy to take that personally, and to have your partner cheat on you or whatever this looked like. You were able to hear the why. And I'm curious, what was the why? And then how, Andy, did you move through that?
It's that's a good question, because there's so many like levels to it. Well, first of all, okay, so one time I heard someone say that the secret to a long marriage is loyalty, and I was like, that doesn't sound right, because people are faulty. And I came to the realization that the secret to a long marriage is forgiveness. And so the first time that Flora cheated on me, first of all, when we met that first day on Grindr, she opened the door at her apartment. My knees were shaking. I was head over heels from day one. So the reason we were married and moved in so quickly, it's because I just kept pursuing her. She's like, but I've been here, but I've done that, but I've done this, but I am this, but I am. I was like, I don't care. I love you. I don't care. I love you. I don't know. I've never felt that for anyone. I guess that's love. So when she told me she cheated on me, I had already gone through breakups and heartbreaks myself, and I was already of the mentality of like, you think about what you bring about and all that bullshit. Well, it's not bullshit, but and so I refused to be a victim. I was like, I'm not the person that gets cheated on. So either this happens never again and we move past it, and or this happens again and we just don't end up together, or I refused. I wanted to understand it in a way that I wasn't a victim, or I wasn't the person that got cheated on. Mm-hmm. And
you didn't want it to be the end of your story.
Yeah, I just didn't. I didn't want that to be the end, because I knew that then it would turn into a cycle. I would have to go back and readdress over and over until it had been dealt with. And it wasn't until a year and a half later, or whenever we did end up like cheating again and bringing this up, and after having done reading the books together, and we moved into a van. So we went from living in an apartment to living on wheels before the pandemic. So we were living on wheels for a good 2 years before, or a year and a half before we opened the relationship. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then the marriage part actually happened while we were camping with friends during a psychedelic trip, which to me is meaningful in and of itself.
Right before, but yeah, it was that's important to me because I have a big thing about
It was right
sober-mindedness, and it wasn't we're like tripping on mushrooms and we're like, Mary, forever.
We had the marriage part happen in ceremony, preparation into then entering a trip. Yeah, we were sober when it happened, but unconscious. But the point is, all of that added so much meaning to where I was already in my journey, because I'm now spiritual, not religious. I try to meditate. I'm big into frequencies and vibrations and Alan Watts and Terrence McKenna, and I love psychedelics. So all of that spoke my language, and forgiveness is at the center of all of that, really, in the form of conversation, which then turned into compersion as we stepped into polyamory with more conscious awareness if that's what it was. Because when we first opened the relationship and she started seeing, we'll backtrack to how we tried, things together. But when she started seeing people by herself, I had like a week and a half of just like mourning and panic and like heavy breathing and like of just like processing, this is what I want, but it feels so weird, and I'm crying, but I'm laughing. And it was like a little bit of that. And then that was dealt with. And it was literally my forgiveness transmutating into compersion, because now I'm in a place where to think that I'd have to forgive her being or talking to anyone, it's just silly. If it makes her happy, it makes me happy. It's not where I was at the beginning of this journey. But it was very much, for me, that was a spiritual sort of process that I sort of went through. And I'm happy that I did. Yeah. It was very much a deprogramming of the psyche.
Yeah. And I just have to say, I'm impressed like how quickly you did that, relatively quickly. Some people, that's, of course, we're all growing and learning throughout life, but you made some really big leaps in a short amount of time, and that's really awesome. That's cool.
I think it was her heart. I couldn't let it go. I probably would have gone to polyamory later in life, but she's just such an incredible person that I couldn't not invest. I love you.
No.
Yeah, that's very sweet.
Yeah, I would love to build on that a little bit and talk, because I think, right, there's so much stigma around infidelity, right? And we, like, people can't see what we see, but like the love between you two is like
palpable,
radiating, and yeah, right. You started off with an infidelity, and that it's so easy to vilify that person. Like, you did this, you're a cheater, you'll always be a cheater, and that's just who you are now and forever. But I'm curious for you, Flora, what was your why? What was actually going on for you at that time?
Yeah, it was, so I think I totally agree that infidelity is super highly stigmatized. We were talking about this. I was making sure that Andy was okay, that it's something we talk about publicly, which we have before. It's part of our story that it is something that we have overcome. And I definitely want more people to talk about it, because it is something that is happening super often. And it's way harder to, experience hurt in a relationship and have nobody to talk about it with, or to have no framework for talking about it, moving through it, etc. The motivation on my end was, I think the motivation on my end really is like a bit of polysexuality. I wasn't seeking out anything emotional. It was sex that I was looking at, and part of that was that I had been using sex as sex and intimacy as a way to cope with the loss of this former partner. And so when I met Andy, I was in the middle of that process. So just because we started dating didn't automatically snap me out of this thing that I had been doing. And that just kept up. I was having really intense emotions. I was having a really hard time. I didn't yet feel like super deeply safe communicating with Andy about things as we have come to, I mean, we've been together over 7 years at this point. But, you know, in the first 6 months, you're not just all of the sudden like, oh, I can trust this person with my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, or at least I'm not. Anyway. So it was that. It was that I was using sex as a coping mechanism, I think, in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting thing because what happened was I took actions to make myself feel better, and then those same actions made my partner feel worse. And it was another moment. I've had a lot of moments over our 7 years of like feeling affirmation and feeling renewed commitment to our relationship. And that was one of them where I was like, wow, it affected me very deeply to know that I had hurt Andy so much. And I'm like, oh, this is something I really don't want to do for my own sake. I don't want this person to be hurting. So when it came up again in the future, having feelings of like wanting to sleep with someone else, and this was after we had already married each other, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm planning to live to be like 100 years old. Am I serious about only sleeping with you for the rest of my life? And that is how the conversation came up between us, is that I was like, oh, I love you. We need to talk about this because I am not going to do 80 years of like just you.
Just the same.
We're going eventually, like I want to stick it out. I'll stick it out as long as we need to. We'll navigate it however we have to. Right. But I'm not going 80 years and we're the only two sleeping with each other.
And it was a really good way to present it because we were already married. We had already stepped out of the relationship on both ends. We had already gotten past those hurdles. We were now living in a van in Venice Beach. And it was like presented morbidly, almost like it felt like a temptation. I was like, wait, so it almost like a hall pass. Like it was like, okay, so we could consider doing this and still safely return to each other. Like that's a thing. And it was no longer like, I mean, it was scary once we stepped into it, but like the conversation itself felt right. It felt like if we were going to stay together, this was a conversation to be having at that moment. Yeah.
I think it felt deeply realistic for both of us.
Yeah, it was like, well, shit.
Because I think
the outcome of this relationship of this conversation is going to determine the rest of the relationship. Because if we don't want to open up the relationship, then we've officially put an end date to it, right? So it's like, and it was like, well, I don't want to not be with you. So what does that look like? You know?
Yeah. It's interesting the way that it's sort of the way you kind of describe that is at a point where we both decide we need or want to have sex or intimacy with other people. That is the date that we then have to end our partnership if it is not an open partnership. And It sounds like you're saying, well, we're way more committed to each other than that. So let's figure out how we do both at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is exactly what it is.
I was also very aware that I'm a sexual person, but I'm not as sexual as Flora is. And so I was also, again, in not wanting to be that person. I didn't want to be the person that couldn't sexually satisfy my partner. Like that's a weird, like if you're that person, it means you're not letting your person go get it elsewhere. And that's on you. Like, you know what I mean? So if there are things that I cannot do or meet on certain times or in certain ways for Flora, that's no determinant to who I am as a person, to our relationship. And so coming to find that out, also realizing, okay, my lack of needing or wanting to be sexual as often or in as many ways as you want to be it's no longer, in many ways in monogamy, becomes a point of tension. You know, it doesn't have to be. So that was kind of cool too.
It was a journey. So for the last 4 years, which is exciting because we've now been together longer in a non-monogamous relationship than we were together in a monogamous relationship. That feels super affirming to have gotten to that place. And it helps because we came to it early. Like, obviously, we're not a couple who is monogamous for 20 years. Mm-hmm. That would take us a lot longer. But it feels cool because it's like, oh, this is actually the relationship that we have is more non-monogamous than it ever was monogamous. Mm-hmm. Because we've just lived more of our relationship in this context. And transitioning out of monogamy, it was like, basically the way that it went was I initiated and said to Andy, so like, let's talk this through and figure out what is a comfortable step from where we are, what does that look like to go somewhere else? And we went to the very common place of threesomes, mm-hmm. The classic starter non-monogamy for so many of us.
Your starter pack, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And
that's funny.
Well, part of that for me came up then as soon as we got into that, as soon as we got into the discussion of having sex with someone else, I brought up sexual health because that has been very important to me for a very long time. And I'm like, okay, for starters, if we're going out there in any context, let's go get tested. Let's go get on PrEP. And that is what we did. And that is, I mention it not only because it's part of our story, but it's something that I know you both care about. Mm-hmm. And I'm so thankful that the non-monogamous and polyamorous and kink communities overall, I think, take sexual health more seriously than the general population. And that's one of the things that means so much to me to be a part of those communities is like the safety and the health surrounding sex and sexual interactions.
Yeah.
So we did that, and then we got into some threesome situations, which again, it's like there are some parts of our story that are very unique, and there are some parts of our story that are like, oh yeah, so starter pack.
So the conversation happened, and then that was sort of the gateway to it sounds like your first step was sort of, how do we find someone or maybe someones to have sort of invite in?
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty quickly, though, we came to realize that we both, the threesome dynamic, unless it's with someone very specific, it just was not working for us for multiple reasons. Like we tried it with a couple people. We got really close friends, and then we got ghosted. And then one time we got catfished by like a famous football player that then sort of
not to dox him, but he was a baseball player.
Oh. Whatever.
But no, that was a very
sports ball player.
Yeah, sports ball. That was a very funny encounter that we had.
That was the first of a few encounters where I feel like I was put in the corner and Flora was being essentially fetishized. We started running into chasers as a trans non-binary couple. Mm-hmm. We pretty quickly, like probably 3 or 4 threesomes into the journey, we realized, we got to approach this differently.
Can you say a little bit more about that? Because I think that's not necessarily something that very many of us experience, or maybe could be more aware of as the third person or people, reaching out or seeking out these types of connections.
Yeah.
We dove in just really quickly and really headstrong and in a very, not well researched or thought out way. We downloaded an app and started swiping. We made a joint profile because that was the agreement, was like, okay, let's look at what we would do together. I don't want you going off on your own. That's what was comfortable for Andy to begin with. And I said, okay, if that's something you're comfortable with, that's something I'm interested in, let's proceed. So we did. And it was just a number of interactions. I would say it was kind of one of two things. One thing was someone matched with our joint profile that has 2 names on it and both of us in every single photo and well filled out bio and blah, 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 blah. And they were really just trying to connect with me. That happened a number of times, which like this catfisher sports ball guy, that was part of what happened there was like we were hanging out, and then it's like at some point in the middle, he like just stopped having sex with Andy and was like just trying to have sex with me. And that's it. Having a first experience like that, it can be very difficult to speak up in the moment. It can be difficult to speak up at any moment.
Yeah.
But when we unpacked that afterwards, was like, it was a bit of a turning point, because it was like, okay, so you've been hurt through this thing that we mutually decided to do now. I didn't cheat on you, but you still got hurt. So what do we do? How do we pivot our approach again to take more care of you? And that's where it went, was like, okay, so if we're looking at just one person, there for us should be relatively similar level of attraction from a third person. Mm-hmm. Like that's the most ideal thing. And we just had to accept that it doesn't come around that often. Mm-hmm. But if we're going to have a threesome, unless it's a very specific dynamic, it is best that like the third person is about as attracted to each
both
of us.
Of you. Yeah.
Well, 3 things. So when it comes to threesomes, like if it's Flora and I coming into a threesome, the way I prefer it now, having gone through this journey, is that I'd like the 2 of us to be focused on the person. Whereas if I go into a threesome with strangers, and I would like the energy to be more equilateral. But the point of both situations is that I have something to focus on. We all have something to focus on, really, and no one's being ignored. If I'm coming in with my partner and we can both love on the third, to me that feels more special than coming in with my partner and realizing that the other person's really just into her and now I'm just watching. Some people are into that. It's not my idea of fun. The third thing that we ran into, it was the chaser part, and so we also realized that like if we're going to sleep with someone together, I prefer it's someone who is trans, non-binary, and or queer. I sort of, because a lot of those first were happening with like men who were DL. And it's just not this like the real, like since then we have had incredible orgies and threesomes with explicitly trans and non-binary people. And maybe that was a disconnect that we were missing really early in our poly journey. Yeah, we also really early. Well, not really early, but we went to a dungeon like a couple of years ago, and that was a lot of fun. Never been to anything like that. Mm-hmm. She found it on FetLife, and then we went to the event, and I loved it. I can't wait to go back to another one. I love the idea that there's community like that. Again, with the safety protocols and everything, to witness aftercare at an event like this, mm-hmm. And to just stand there and watch someone receive aftercare was just
I think anybody who's having sex can learn a lot from a solid like dungeon experience, even if you're not involved with anyone else. There's just a lot to observe in a space like that about consent and rules and aftercare.
That's such a good point.
It changed our sexual dynamic in a very real way to step into that space a little bit more. It allowed us to start taking care of each other in more ways. It allowed more open conversation. So, and that's a big theme of all of this, is that like, as soon as we got past infidelity, every change from there has come through conversation, because that was the ground rule that we laid down. Was like, if this relationship is going to change, we need to talk about it before it changes and then allow space for changes. Because otherwise, that triggers that same feeling of infidelity.
Mm-hmm.
That it's like, if you go and do things that are outside of our agreements, that's the definition of infidelity. You've now broken the agreements.
Yeah.
So lots and lots and lots, hours and hours and hours of talking about all of this through. And it deepened our relationship in many, many ways. We both learned a lot more about what it was that we were interested in through exploring together. And part of what came up is like, okay, we both realized threesomes are like it's very hard to find the right dynamic for that to feel fun. And then what? So if that's where we started and that wasn't good, so then, and many times, I will own it, many of the changes in our relationship have come from me initiating. And again, this was a situation where like we had some threesomes, and then I think because it is slightly less of a sex in particular, I should say, because sex is slightly less on Andy's mind than on my own, I think that's part of why I end up being the one to bring it up. So I'm like, okay, so the threesomes weren't really working. So what does that mean? Because I'm only seeing a couple of other things. It's like we have like group sex opportunities where there are just even more people, which, could be even better or even worse than a threesome.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or what? The other thing is doing things separately. And that started with hooking up separately, having sex with other people. And we each tried that out. It's like, okay, this is comfortable. Come back to the relationship, talk it through, make sure that we're good. And
we never really talked details. I think that's something that really early on we were like, unless you really want to know, like, we also like very early on came on to like, also if the person doesn't want their stuff shared or hasn't consented to what went down, then I'm not going to tell you, as long as, you use protection, you get tested. We don't have sex if you haven't used protection or gotten tested. Like, but, it was nice to practice that too, like being able to like, okay, you go hook up, but then you don't have to tell me their name or their age or their whatever, unless you want to. It was very much because I know couples that are poly that do require more information, and that was just not something that felt natural to I think our dynamic.
And I will just interject that was mostly you, because unlike
Like
Andy, I am a voyeur and I'm an exhibitionist and I love details. And I'm like, yeah, you don't have to tell me their name, but like, anonymize the details.
Yeah. So we can fantasize this out too. Yeah.
Right. But it came up that it was like, okay, so Andy didn't want to hear details. And I'm like, okay, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine by me. And on my end, I'm like, if you want to tell me about it, you're welcome to tell me about it. And if it's too much, I'll tell you that it's like too much detail.
And I think part of the reason, at first, at least, I didn't really care to know too much about it is because we still hadn't gotten to this. We still hadn't found this beautiful pool of queer polyamorous people that we're now in the middle of. But it was still a lot of like, well, maybe you'd go hook up with like a DL man or just a man in general. And I didn't want to hear about you potentially being fetishized either, because it took a while to get past the unicorn hunters, which is fine to want that, but it needs to come with a certain sense of responsibility, communication, and honesty about what you want and who you are, because it does put, and this came up in conversation, it puts the queer community in danger when you have someone who could potentially claim the gay panic card, where it's like, I panicked, so I killed you. It's like, nah, bitch, like we don't play that game. We need to feel safe so that it's a safe place to play. And it's fine if you don't want to identify a specific way, but you still do have to we have to vet you enough now. At least I would feel like we'd have to vet you enough to know that you're a safe person to be with.
Yeah.
I don't know if anything I just said made sense, but
it did.
It makes perfect sense.
Learning to navigate that was important as a trans queer couple also.
Yeah.
And I think our relationship has gotten deeper for so many reasons, and that is a big part of the depth that we have now, is that like through some of these experiences, kind of specifically what Andy was just saying, they came to understand my life experience more deeply, particularly with people who are like chasers. And that's, I don't know how familiar you all with the term. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah. Well, I was actually going to ask that, just for anybody who's not familiar, could you explain chasers and DL? That would be, I think, maybe would cover most of the ground that we need to cover to get people.
Yeah. So chasers are, in the way that I'm using it, I'm talking about trans chasers, and those are people, the defining line between a chaser and somebody who's just like normal is that they are only into someone because they are trans.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not about their humanity or their personhood. It's specifically about one single aspect of their identity. And that's really, any chaser is that. You can be a chubby chaser and you don't care about the person. You only care about their size. You can be a blonde chaser. I don't know many of them, but well, actually, there are plenty of people out there who are like, oh, I just like my person just has to have blonde hair. And it's like, okay, well, all right. That's not how I look for people, but go ahead. And DL is short for down low. It's about someone who is not out. So somebody who is like not out as gay often is what that's referring to. And then there's like big overlap between cisgender men who aren't out as gay, who are interested in trans women.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a role that trans women often are willingly or unwillingly fulfilling for other people, is like a place to experiment with sexuality, a place to like understand your own desires and interests deeper. And if it's safe and it's like mutually consented to, that can be a wonderful thing. And if somebody is using you for their own self-improvement or for understanding themselves better, that is so bad. It feels so terrible to be dehumanized in such a way, to be boiled down and reduced to just one part of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
DL also refers to people who are married and don't want to be caught. So
yeah, sometimes that.
It's essentially anyone who, if you had sex with them indoors and you run into them in public, they expect you to act like you've never met.
Yeah.
And so there are parts of the DL aspect that should be honored. Like some people just don't want to be perceived as queer in public space out of safety, and to each their own, and everybody comes out in their own time. But it also has the other side effect where it could put people who are not DL in danger.
Yeah.
Ideally, what we want is sexual liberation for all. The world would be a much better place if more sexual liberated people were allowed to be sexually liberated.
Right.
A lot of our issues really do stem from this conversation, ironically.
Yeah. Thank you both so much for sharing. I want to ask too, do either of you, I'm going to change the subject a little bit. Do either of you have any other comments, thoughts there that you wanted to share on that before I do?
No, go for it. I say go for it.
I'm curious. You had mentioned, coming into this like amazing, what sounds like amazing poly queer group of people now. And I'd love to hear you two talk about that and kind of what does it look like now and where you're at and how you've like, how did you find these people and where, like, what's your community like now?
Yeah. And how does it feel different? Like how has the experience been different?
We're very, very blessed. It took time. It takes time, but um, Los Angeles is a magical place. I love living in LA. Every time I travel outside of LA, I immediately become aware of how blessed I am to be able to be my full self in this town. And so, yeah, over the 7 years that we've been together, we've just been able to foster really beautiful friendships. I'll let you speak, but for instance, I have a partner of 3.5 years whose wedding we went to last year, and then his husband, because my partner was out of town, but his husband went to our legal wedding also earlier last year, and so we've been to each other's weddings, and yet we're still so. That's, to me, that's family. It doesn't get closer. We are a family, and then just the friends that we have, and the friends that they have, and the friendships that they've formed. And anytime someone has a birthday, or anytime someone, every time we have like a Friendsgiving, my birthday was in May last month. We had a little picnic beach day, and my friends and her friends and my partner's friends all sort of got together, and then people were making new connections, and everybody there was queer. Most of them were poly. And then
or non-monogamous. Some.
And it was like 20 of us. And it's just like, you look around and it's like, how do you not clench your pearls and cry in joy? Because it just doesn't get better than that. And it doesn't mean we've all slept with each other by any means, but it just...
Not all of us.
Not all of us. But there's just a big sense of security, and it is queer, but I don't know. I'm just... It took time, but it definitely is a thing where like you blink and you look over your shoulder and you're like, oh yeah, we built something nice. And it's just a matter of showing up, like when someone needs help, or when someone's parents are in town and they're feeling frantic, or when someone's going to go get a tattoo, or when someone needs to be rushed to the ER, or when someone needs a place to crash. It's just to be able to... Part of being polyamorous has actually allowed me to have a bigger capacity for friendships. I used to be very close-minded in my friendships. I used to stick to one or two really close friends and just sort of do that. And I realized that in being poly, I actually have more time, patience, and compassion, and giving of myself to not just partners, but to friends, which is really nice. To find out that I have that capacity, because your capacity gets questioned every time you get to a new hurdle, and then once you get over that hurdle and you realize your heart's just expanded, it's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it's gonna look like when I'm old, when I'm 80, but ideally it'll be a lot of people the same age or not, whatever. But that's a lie that I'm trying to dispel in my own mind, is that in not having the nuclear format family that I was told I needed to secure stability at an old age, I'd like to believe that in building community the way that I am today is going to somehow set me up for a nice, still community-driven future, even in my old age, even though I don't have a lot of examples of what that looks like, sadly. But you guys and us, I think that's where we're headed. We are this new, it would be great to have a big house with lots of people living in it, kitchen table polyamory, kids running around, and like we all pitch in for rent. And there's a river somewhere nearby.
Right. And if somebody gets sick, or somebody needs something, or somebody needs a ride to a doctor's appointment, right? It's not like, well, I have to call my one son and he has to take a day off of work and he has to come and pick me up. And then, right. But like, oh, I can just ask one of the 15 people that I live with. Yeah. And we're all going to the doctor, or whatever it is, right?
I know.
I really love where we have come to now in our relationship, which is that there is a polycule. We're both part of an extended polycule. Currently, I don't have any other partners, although I have had a couple of longer-ish relationships in the last couple of years, which another thing I'm so thankful to non-monogamy for is like all of this talking that we did to develop our relationship also put me in a position to like end relationships in a softer, more graceful, and more thoughtful way. And that is like one of the most beautiful parts of it. In a similar way that like a lot of people don't talk about infidelity, a lot of people don't talk about the separations. A lot of times it is messy, a lot of times it is difficult. But for instance, the last separation that I went through was like the most graceful and like caring separation I've ever been through. And then we like talked it through until there was nothing left, no questions left on either end. And then my ex was like, well, do you want to smoke a joint now? And I'm like, yeah, I think we should. And then we like smoked a joint, and then they're like, okay, well, all right, I don't think there's anything left to say. And I'm like, yeah, I think now I like go home. And then I like went home.
But we've hung out since several times, and they came over for my birthday party last month. And so they're still part of the group of friends. And
that's totally the thing is that like I think we're so lucky to have a polycule that at least up until now, knock on wood, it has been pretty gentle with people entering and exiting. And we haven't had a lot of mess in the extended polycule, which is not something that we're at all in control of. So we just get to benefit from, having good people around. And that's something that I really, really love and appreciate about it is that like in a polycule, in a group of people who are relating with one another, whether it's platonic, romantic, sexual, etc., your base of people who have been vetted in a particular way is now so much bigger that you're not meeting random people from the internet whether you're trying to make friends or date. If it's somebody who's in the polycule already, I have an added layer of confidence going into a situation like that. And safety. Yeah, safety is such a big thing. I'm like, oh, I know this is a safe person. Yeah. Even if things don't work out, I'm not going to be in danger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just to clarify, she's not dating anyone currently. Our polycule consists of her and I, and then I have a boyfriend who's married. And then I have a girlfriend who is sort of dating someone else who's also married. And the person that she's dating that they're married to, we've met and hung out many times. The person that my boyfriend's married to, we've met and hung out with many times. The person you used to date, we still hang out with, and they're roommates sometimes and friends. And then we also have queer friends that we've never dated, but are poly and queer, and we just adore to pieces. And so we consider all of that the polycule because of the fact that even though our friends that we have that we're not dating are not necessarily directly connected to my boyfriend's husband, they do know of each other. And if they ran into each other at an event or something, they would recognize each other as part of the family, which is kind of nice and very much invaluable, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for summarizing that so beautifully.
Yeah. I hope that makes sense.
It did.
Yeah.
That was perfect. Yeah. I love it. And I love too that the idea that a polycule isn't just people you're hooking up with or people you're in deep partnership with, but it is all of the people who are your sort of love and support system. And
yeah. It might be different for people, but the way I'm describing it, essentially, it's like anyone who's a queer friend of mine who's also poly, who has met my poly friends, who may have hooked up with some of us, like you're officially part of the group, period. And that's just what it means. You can call me, I can call you, and if you're available, great. And if you're not, no big deal.
Yeah.
But
I think relating it to a family, it's like, you have second cousins or whatever. It's like that are like queer poly friends are the second cousins of the polycule.
Yeah.
But it's like we are intimately involved, even if that's not like sexual or romantic. And I would say that's a big part of it, is space for intimacy. That's sort of the distinction for me personally, is that like the people who I do consider to be a part of it, that I'm not involved with romantically or sexually, it's the level of intimacy that brings them into that group of people.
Yeah.
Because my closest friends they're incredibly intimate relationships.
Yeah.
And part of that, I'm thankful that I came to it one way or another, because our non-monogamy is something that helped me to reassess my friendships and how I show up in my friendships and what kind of energy I put into those and how I work on maintaining those relationships. A lot of deeper understanding of my own self and needs over the years has come out through this relationship.
Fun fact, tomorrow, we're actually presenting at a conference for educators, second year in a row, on how to be an ally and how to normalize non-monogamy also, within the context of the classroom.
Not quite the classroom, but this is how we're different.
It is for educators, though.
It's not for educators either. They're social workers, but yes.
Educate me, wife.
Yeah.
But we'll be bringing this up, our conversation from today.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think it would be a great place to transition. First of all, I want to say your story is amazing. And I feel like we will definitely have the two of you back on to tell more of it and to expand on it. But I would love to, we do know you do some amazing advocacy work and some educational work and allyship, and would love to talk more about what that looks like, how you two do that, and where people can find it, and just all of the amazing stuff you're doing. So let's dig into that.
Yeah, let's do it.
We have a joint Instagram account. It's called Policulturista, and it's we'll send you the way it's written later on.
Yep. We'll have links. Links are in the show notes for anybody who was just like trying to write that down.
Polyculturista, to say it a little more American.
More American.
Yeah.
It's where we used to post a lot of like our van life and life on wheels, and then it transitioned into being more about polyamory as well. So you get to see both.
It was always about us. It was like a little relationship page. And then as we moved into non-monogamy, it was like, well, I guess this is not just about us anymore. This is kind of bigger than just you and me. So
community. So but so that's our Instagram, and we haven't done a lot, but because we're still young and we're living life, but we have read books on relationships and have watched shows like Married at First Sight and then Big Fiance and all those things. And it's like, where is the poly representation? So we're always wanting to create it, write it, put it out there. We are wanting to write our own book with our journey and some of the stuff we've talked about today. And then the conference tomorrow, where we're just gonna, it's a bit of a Q&A and a little bit of just letting people know some stats and where polyamory is in the eyes of the world stage. The fact that the UN is saying that polygamy should be banned everywhere in the world because it's oppressive to women, but then they refuse to dive into the fact that they're not addressing polyandry or other forms of polygamy. They're just talking about the one time where men abused women, but like that's not true of the umbrella. And I feel like it's such a disservice for the UN to throw us all into a sentence like that, because it literally says it should be outlawed everywhere it exists, and yet it's not true that it's abusive, and we're out here and we're thriving. Also, talking about the fact that like Alaska and California are the only states that allow for more than two parents on a child's birth certificate, and like maybe just talk about why that would even matter and what that would mean if more states allowed it, and for families like us, like, just because there's no reason you shouldn't have legally 3 parents. Why would it be illegal? The fact that it's illegal speaks to an imperial, colonial, very much all hail the queen kind of, it all ties back to that. So intersectionality is the big word for us as a couple, is what's driving us. It's what, to me, stepping into polyamory, stepping into my queerness, stepping into my gender fluidness, intersectionality just keeps coming up. And to speak to that, and to speak it loudly, and to try to bring it to everything we do, is now, at least I speak for myself, is what my goal, my driving force. Yeah. Am I ranting? I feel like
No, it's wonderful.
It's a good rant. It's
great.
a positive rant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say intersectionality is the basis of it for me. It all boils back down to that, because there's only one way to talk about what it means for people to be marginalized or oppressed. There are a lot of different things that go into different dynamics, but at the end of the day, if someone is being marginalized or oppressed, that includes a lot of the very same things. It includes social stigmas. It includes legal impediments, like Andy was mentioning. That is a big area that really the entire world is still not quite touching, is like legislating non-monogamy. There are a couple of locales in the United States that have taken steps towards that, but changing things legislatively is one thing. I'm not a legislator, so all I can really do there is like point people in the direction of other people who know better, who are actually leading those charges, because people are. Something I do know better is internet apps, which is another place that we have done some of this advocacy. I feel very proud, actually. There is a particular internet app that we may or may not have mentioned earlier, who we got on a casting to tell our love story and our coming out story for this app. They were producing content. So we went and we shot those, and big wag of the finger to unnamed app, because they've only released one of our 2 videos, and it is like 4 years later. Our love story still has never been published, but
Oh.
Until today.
Until today.
Yeah, it's supposed to be for trans representation.
Yeah.
Week, and then
they did the thing that you shouldn't do, which is like it got to Trans Awareness Week. They realized they had no content, and then they like rushed to film a bunch of stuff, and then they like milked the release of that content for years, and then people lost jobs and things were restructured and blah blah blah, and who knows if that video will ever see the light of day. Fingers crossed, though.
Well, but we can guarantee that they'll at least change their logo to have rainbows for Pride Month.
Oh, definitely.
They did change the app as a result of meeting Flora.
That is where I was going, is that we had a big privilege, although our video didn't come out, we had a big privilege of being invited back to speak with employees about making that app more inclusive and about what steps could be taken. And I was really incredibly happy to see that some of the things I personally suggested were implemented, such as like, sometimes it's little, but little things can be so big.
Yeah.
Like changing the description of the app in the App Store to reflect who the real users are. Like, they're like, oh yeah, I guess, I don't know, they hadn't thought about the last time they updated the app description. And yeah, making the app more realistic to who is using it and how they're using it. It was it's that thing that happens often with corporations where they like took it very seriously, and it was a nice Zoom meeting that we had. It was a nice video meeting we had, but it only changes so much.
I just feel like I want to give them a little bit more context. It's an app for men to find men to hook up. But the thing is, trans women are on it all the time. Mm-hmm. And it was nowhere on the app was saying you can find trans women on here. And anytime a trans woman did go on it, very often they got hate on. So after having spoken to us and understanding the fact that trans women do go in these apps, all of a sudden, per her suggestion, the app now says,
it's for bi and queer.
It's for bi and queer.
Instead of just saying it's for gay people.
Yeah.
Like essentially something to that effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
So small but meaningful change.
Yeah.
And one conversation at a time.
Yeah.
And there was another company that we spoke with. That's another online dating app developer. And I'm very proud to say that I think we both spoke with them directly, and then they were like, whoa. It sounds like we need to completely rethink our app for lesbians. And I was like, yeah, you do. You're like, this app you've put together is not for lesbians. This is for someone else. Like, you're doing something else that no lesbian I know is going to connect with this app that you're making. They asked if we would put together a panel of people. So we did like a research panel for them to get a better understanding of what it is that like lesbians and queer people of all genders are actually looking for on dating apps.
Did that.
Yeah.
So that was fun.
It was very validating for them to literally respond with like, oh, I think we need to go back to the drawing board.
Amazing.
Yeah. I don't think we got this at all. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think you did. You're making another app that's like lots of other apps that are out there that people already aren't using because it's not made for them. So
start over.
Yeah.
Sorry if you have to go back to the beginning and like get something that'll actually work, but
yeah.
Wow.
Amazing. Well, thank you both. I will say again, this will not be the last time you grace our presence on there. We're graced with your presence on the show. But thank you both for the work you're doing, for sharing your story here, and we will have you back on to expand upon it and go deeper on it because this was amazing. So yeah thank you.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else that either of you wanted to get out there?
Well, I just want to thank you for doing the work you're doing. I think podcasts like this are invaluable, especially for newcomers. It's really, really nice to be seen and feel seen. Yeah, I don't know when this is going to come out, but I'll throw my little juju out there. I'm in a play in LA. It's about homelessness. It's about living in a van in Venice Beach. It's about police brutality. It's about intersectionality. A lot of the things we talked about. It's a very queer play. I'm one of the leads. I play a gay gender fluid character. It's part of the Hollywood Fringe. It's called Van Life with a Y. And if you're in town for Los Angeles during the month of June, that's what I'll be up to. And yeah, just that's the kind of work we're looking for. Just meaningful intersectional work. And free Palestine, honestly, please. And yeah. Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
I'd say don't lose hope. That's what I want to put out there. Life can be very heavy in so many different ways, and being able to find hope, or if you can't find your own, look for somebody who can bring that hope to you, because that's how we keep doing it, is by continuing to fight these fights, by continuing to normalize, by continuing to expand rights and access. Don't lose hope. Keep moving. And talk it out, please.
Yeah. Well said.
Thank you both so much for that, for those words, for everything. We're really grateful to have had this conversation today and to get this out there. And just a lot of gratitude to both of you, and can't wait to continue to connect in the future.
Yes.
Likewise. Yeah.
Yes.
Reach out anytime.
Wonderful. Well, enjoy your Los Angeles day today. Enjoy the rest of Pride Month, and we will see you all around.
Yes.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
And we're back. Nailed it.
Ooh, perfect.
Thank you so much, Flora and Andy, for coming on. Well, first of all, for reaching out to us, wanting to come on, then sharing your story, and for all of the amazing work that you do. It was a blast talking to you, and I'm excited that you're in our lives.
Yes, thank you both. So glad we got to share your story. Thank you for reaching out. And again, as Emma said, for the work you do, I sound like just a mirror machine. All right, I'm going first on this part.
Okay.
We would love to have you check out our podcast show notes over on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Click on the podcast tab. There you can find links. Actually, you can find all of our 350 guests who have come before Flora and Andy, 349 to be specific. Photos and links to all of the work that everybody does, including Flora and Andy and their Instagram page. So please, please, please check that out. Again, our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Click on the podcast tab, or you can find a direct link in your podcast player down below.
And while you're over there, go to the community tab and you can see all of the information about our virtual community. We have an upcoming in-person retreat for our virtual community, September 13th to the 15th, coming up 2024. We're super excited about this. So mark your calendars, go and check it out. Come and join us. And yeah.
We'll see you here.
Yeah.
All right. Next week. Actually, before next week, we have this week. We have an amazing episode coming up on Friday. Once a month, I do an Ask Us Anything episode with one of our close friends, Miche, who is a therapist. Those are where we answer all of your questions. People send in questions. You should send us a question. And then we play your questions, we answer them, and we actually have a special guest this week.
We do.
We brought in the amazing Dr. Marie Tuin. She is a researcher, a relationship coach, and all-around amazing person.
And just wrote a book
Called What is Compersion? You can find links. Those same show notes we were telling you about a minute ago. Go over there. You'll find a link to save 25% off of a copy of her book. It's a fantastic book, and we would love to have you check it out. But we invited Marie on Friday to join us for questions about compersion. So we have a handful of questions that you all sent in to us, and we're going to dig into those for like a whole hour.
So come back and listen on Friday. And then next week, we have another interview on Wednesday with Krista Lee. We are very excited about this and can't wait to bring them on the episode.
Yes, we'll see you all next week. We'll see y'all Friday.
On Friday.
Then we'll see you next week.
Yes.
I keep wanting to jump into next week.
I know.
Don't miss Friday.
Friday first, the next Wednesday.
Don't forget Friday like Finn. That's what I say.
Fridays are important days.
They're the best day of the week.
Yeah. They're good days. You don't want to miss them.
Got a real love affair going with Fridays.
Alrighty. I think we've drilled it home.
I think it's been drilled.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.